The sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me, is a lie. Because we know it to be true that words hurt. Man, words hurt. We know this because we've received them and we have spewed them. And I think this is exactly what Jesus is intending to say here in this last beatitude. That people are going to say hurtful and hateful words at you, about you, to you. And so you have to be ready. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. All right, there's a lot here in these two verses. Jesus knows that people who are listening to the Sermon on the Mount are people who are on the losing end of words, a lot like the prophets were in the Old Testament. So he blesses them. He reminds them that they are more than the words being slung at them, and their reward is great in heaven. I can't help but think that Jesus knew that this behavior was still going to exist even today. It's just part of the human condition. We know there will always be people who are reviled. And I think that's an important word here in these two verses, revile. It means people who criticize you in an abusive and an insulting way. That's what revile means. Criticize you in an abusive and an insulting way. And I've been on the receiving end of these words. And here's the wicked part. When people utter all kinds of evil against me falsely, now they're the ones who did the wrong thing, but I have now internalized what they've said to me. I even kind of start to believe what they've said to me, and I often respond in kind. So 100 people could tell me something positive, and the 101st person could say something biting. If I'm not careful, I will hold on to the one biting comment. If I'm not conscious to this process in real time, then I will internalize that one sound bite. It'll play on repeat in my mind until I believe it to be true. It doesn't matter that 100 more people said the opposite. It's the one thing that hurt me, and I start to believe it. And then, when you start to believe that sound bite, and you're unconscious to what's happening inside of you, here's what we all do. We get frustrated, and we say something that we immediately regret, and it's usually to bystanders. It's usually to people who had nothing to do with the interaction or the situation at hand. And we all do it. We say the hurtful thing, and it usually lands at the people we love. Work's stressful and frustrating. We come home and we raise our voice at the people we love. We're stressed, but they didn't cause the stress, and they don't deserve our anger. But they're safe, and so we say it because we know we can get away with it. We have to let the air out of the balloon. This reminds me of a quote by Richard Rohr, and I usually quote this when it deals with people's grief, but it really works here too when you're talking about taming the tongue. Here's his quote. If we don't learn to transform our pain, we will surely learn to transmit it. Let me say that again. If we don't learn to transform our pain, we will surely learn to transmit it. This is true for all of us. And so Jesus is speaking to the first half of the problem here and saying, I can help you transform your pain. Don't give in to the temptation to transmit the pain back when people revile you. Learn to see what's happening in real time, and you will be blessed. But you need to hold that there are two sides of the equation here. One side is people say something to you and you respond. The other side is that you responded negatively. And that's what we need to fix today. I can't help but take today's beatitude and lay it next to Jesus' brother James. In James chapter 3, James picks up on the same conversation, but it's the back half of this conversation. Instead of speaking to the ones who are being persecuted, James chooses to speak to the ones who are doing the persecuting. He's speaking to those who have transmitted their pain through words onto others. Listen to this. This is in your Bible, and it is deeply cutting. James 3. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us make many mistakes. Anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with the bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. These are powerful words. The tongue is tiny. It pales in comparison to all other parts of your body and your lives and relationships, yet this tiny little thing is what controls us. It's the rudder that steers us. It's the spark that inflames us. As big as we are, as much as we've accomplished, it is the tongue, as tiny as it is, that can bring it all down. You can lose friends over words. You can damage family ties over words. You can set ablaze decades of goodwill in a single instant with words, with just words. You can make someone feel as if they do not belong with just words. And Jesus knows this. So he blesses those who are being pummeled by someone else's words. And James knows this, so he cautions those who are doing the pummeling. All right, back into James. This is verse 7. For every species of beasts and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With our tongues, we bless the Lord and Father, and with it, we curse those who were made in the likeness of God. Yep, we sure do. Verse 10. From the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Nope. It shouldn't. As Christians, we must make sure we're taming our tongues as best we can. What we say to one another matters. How we say it to one another matters. How we type it into the internet matters. Verse 11. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives, or a grapevine figs? No, no more can salt water yield fresh. James is all over the metaphors here. He's saying that words can cut people down, it can drown people out, and we must learn to control the parts of us that seek mercilessness. Because whether we realize it or not, our words hurt. So much so, the research honestly now proves it. There's science behind this. I first got concerned about the effects of what words do to people, what bullying and negative self-talk. I got into this several years ago, and I learned this from Henry Nouwen. This research is pretty remarkable. First, Henry Nouwen says that people listen to outside voices more than they do their inner voice. And when that happens, the second thing happens, our personalities and desires, and even our wants, they come from outside of who we are. We let the world external to us tell us what it is we want. Our internal makeup then is shaped, at least partially, by what comes to us from the outside. And then what comes to us from the outside is usually negative words. Advertisements use words, and they tell you what's wrong with you, and you could just buy the product. Commercials use words. They will often tell you what's wrong, but how you can fix it. Teachers use words. Coaches use words. Parents use words. We interpret these words, and they are occurring to us from outside of us all the time. We then process it internally. And when this happens, if we're unconscious to it, the words seep into our thought patterns, and we begin to define our selfhood by them. If the words are loving enough, they make us feel better about who we are. If the words are not, then we begin to question our place in the world. So Nouwen has some research that goes like this, and it is a vicious spiral. The world's voices tells us something negative, something like this: you're not good enough unless you prove your worth. You listen to this narrative and you internalize it, and you enter into a self-rejection. I'm not good enough. I can't prove my worth. I must be unworthy. So self-rejection creates a neurosis of insecurity. Insecurity, if it goes untouched and it's allowed to just define who you are, it leads to what Nouwen calls outer human darkness. Outer darkness is when people start to feel like they no longer belong into the human existence. And when they start feeling this way, the voices that they hear on repeat is that, see, I told you, you're not good enough. You can't prove your worth. And the cycle just repeats. It is vicious. And do you know how all of this starts? Because of someone else's words. Words hurt. They lead people to feel like they don't even belong. Now, according to studies from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there are more teenagers and young adults who die from suicide every year than collectively people die from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, and chronic lung diseases combined. Do you know what leads, especially youth, down this road? Someone else's words. And James knows this, and he warns all of us here in verse 10. From the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. No, it ought not. we have to speak to one another better. We have to use words better. We have to tame our tongues better. And so Jesus comes in here at the end to help those who are victims of someone else's words, someone else's pain that they feel they need to transmit to someone else. Because when people don't use better words, even though they should, their pain lands on all of us. And so Jesus says to us, blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Your reward will be great in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is helping raise the awareness of those on the losing end of words, and he blesses them so they can transform their pain. Now, James is helping us raise awareness of those who are delivering the harmful words and telling them, stop transmitting your pain onto someone else. Go take that pain to Jesus and let it be transformed. Together, James and Jesus are telling us all that people are going to criticize you, and it's going to be very painful. You will feel it at an internal level. But blessed are you who are able to transform your pain. Because when you are reviled, you can rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven.